Hey everybody, welcome to today's Take Heart. I have been enjoying listening to Mike's little series on the spiritual disciplines, and I want to hop on the bandwagon today and talk about something that I think runs through all of the disciplines and is really, really helpful, and it's the power of habit. And I want to look at how can we try and harness the power of habit to help us with the disciplines and help us with what the disciplines are trying to help us do. The disciplines, as Mike has said, they're a great way of us partnering with God and opening ourselves up to Him changing us. And Paul talks a bit about this kind of partnership in Philippians chapter 2, verse 12. So he says this: "Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill His good purpose." So one of the things Paul is saying there is that God works things into us, and then He encourages the Philippians, and He would encourage us to work what God is working in out. I kind of find it helpful to have a mental picture of it like it's as if God is planting a seed in our spirits or in our souls, and all the life and all the growth comes from the seed. It's all because of God's grace. At the same time, where we can play a role and we can play a part is in nurturing what it is that God has planted in us, in cultivating it, as it were, to give it freedom to grow and actually to give it the best conditions to thrive and to bear fruit in our souls and ultimately in our lives. And habits are one thing that can be really helpful. So there's a book called The Power of Habit. It's not a Christian book, but here's a quote from it. It says this: "Lots of the choices we make each day feel like the product of a well-considered decision-making machine, but they're not. They're habits. And though each habit means relatively little on its own, over time, the meals we order, what we say to our kids each night, whether we save or spend, how often we exercise, and the way we organize our thoughts and work routines have enormous impacts on our health, productivity, financial security, and happiness." One of the things he's getting at there is that habits are those things that once upon a time we made a conscious decision to do that, but then after a while it's just become what you do without even thinking. So maybe once upon a time I consciously decided I'm going to put salt on my chips. Now I do it without thinking. Once upon a time, many, many years ago, I consciously decided, do you know what? I'd like to check social media. Now it is where I go when I have any spare second. It's like my hand is doing it automatically without my brain engaging. It's a habit now. And the other thing that he's saying there in that little extract is that if that's what a habit is, habits also have this power to shape us over time. They're not by any means the only thing that shape us, but they play a role. So as we consider what Mike has been talking about with the various disciplines, it can be really helpful, I think, to prayerfully come before God. You might want to do this just by yourself. You may want to do this over just a chat with a friend, but I know I found it really, really helpful to do it in my own life. Just to ask the question, what are my habits? What are my habits? And how are they shaping me? Some habits, I think they're probably fairly neutral. So if you eat a cheese sandwich for lunch every day, I'm not sure that's going to be having a massive impact on your character. But other habits probably are shaping us without us even being aware that they are. So I remember a couple of years ago, I just began to notice one of the things that I was doing without thinking about it, it was a habit, is the last thing I did before I went to sleep every night was check social media. And I think it's good to check social media, but I just found, for me personally, as I thought about what that was doing and how that was shaping my mind, I just began to notice that I was just going to bed with all this really unhelpful stuff racing around, and the kind of reactions that things that were pretty neutral were being put on social media, but I was reacting to them and because of my issues, and it just really wasn't helpful. And so I thought, what can I do to break this habit and replace it with something? That's one of the things that people say is when you have a bad habit, it's helpful to replace it with an alternative, a good habit. My granddad always used to carry a pack of Polos around and have minty breath. And that was because he quit smoking after he'd been smoking for decades. And that was his replacement for it. It was like every time he had a craving, he'd have a Polo. And so I was like, how can I replace this with something healthy? Something that will do me good and shape me in a positive way. And so I replaced it with reading the Psalms. And so for the last couple of years, most nights before I've gone to bed, I've read a psalm, and I found that has meant that I've gone to bed with that at the forefront of my mind, filling my heart. And sometimes when I'm reading it, I'm half asleep and all of that stuff. But it's become for me now a habit that it's weird for me not to do it, and I think it's shaping me in a positive way. Often, again, without my being aware of it, it just feels very ordinary a lot of the time, but it's beginning to shape me. When we ask this question, again, what are my habits and how are they shaping me? And we do it in the light of, I want to work out what God is working in. Again, another helpful thing just to reflect on for a few minutes might be, well, what is God working into me? What are those things that he's really speaking to me about? And a little clue that it might be the Holy Spirit just kind of giving you a nudge is that it's something that if you feel like you want to grow in it, it feels exciting to you. It feels like, yeah. And so often I think, oh, it must be God because I feel so guilty. And sometimes God convicts us about things, of course. But often the way he speaks is he might call us into something really positively. So one of the things I feel like he's speaking to me about a lot at the moment is to be an encourager of other people. And I don't mean preaching, I mean one-on-one encouraging other people. And I don't think that's something I'm particularly good at. But I think it's him talking to me because I want to be good at it. Like, for some reason in the last couple of months, that's just been increasingly just growing in my heart. And I'm excited about how could I be somebody who spends their life championing and serving and cheering on others. And so if that's what he's working into me, a question I've then kind of been pondering is, well, what could I do to cultivate that? What is there a habit that I could begin to practice that would allow me to just nurture what he's working in? And whenever we begin to practice these things, it feels clunky, like learning to change gear and learning to do a hill start when you start driving. But after a while, it becomes second nature. So with the spiritual disciplines, is there one of them that stood out over the last couple of days? One that's really excited you? You know, it might be the thought of cultivating humility through the discipline of service, or having the freedom from shame that comes when we practice the discipline of confession, or experiencing intimacy with God when the discipline of worship becomes part of the rhythm of our lives, or just knowing him, having our minds and our hearts expanded as we study and just fill ourselves with the revelation of our amazing God. But is one of those things, is there something that excites you? And if there is there a habit, something that you could just work into every single day that would help you work out that which God is working in?